to BSI, the podcast with Benny Stillhammer, Dowsy and Arco Para. Enjoy!
This is Rob Stone, the little 98-pounder. my neighbor, my Manhattan.
Your neighbor. What would be one thing that you, looking back on now in hindsight, you would change about what you had power in changing? Welcome to BSI, the podcast. We are bringing Bruce Arena today, one of the American soccer legends here in the United States. And so I'm sure he'll have a lot of things to talk about that most of us have never heard about before. We obviously have had a slight break from our normal proceedings here at BSI. We had a fantastic conversation with Jeremy, an important one that I think we all kind of were vulnerable and opened up to and talked about a lot of experiences. And so I urge anybody that hasn't listened to that bonus podcast to go back and listen to it. And now as we get into, our normal proceedings again, we keep that at the forefront and we look to talk to Bruce about some of those issues and soccer.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to talk to Bruce about those issues and get his perspective on it all, because we're not trying to detract from what's going on, especially myself, who, I'm very deeply rooted to what has been going on and affected. And, I go through my moments of still frustration, sadness, and all the above. But with all that being said, a lot of our fans have reached out to us for support and wanting to hear, future mini-series on the inequities that are occurring in our world. And that's something that we are really deep into pursuing. So hopefully that can be finalized very soon for those who are really curious and want to continue on with the education. And I'm looking to be a part of a project or two that are going to be announced hopefully in the next, relatively, few days that are exciting projects that also bring awareness and education. So this hasn't been lost on any of us, especially myself. But I just wanted to put that out there before we get on to Bruce and hopefully have a solid podcast all around.
Yeah, yep. Well said, guys. I think we can get started.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not waste any more time. Let's get Bruce. Welcome, Bruce, to the podcast. Thanks for coming on, dude. We were happy enough to have you on in that Zoom party call, but now we actually have you on for the podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Well, I appreciate it. I love you guys. This should be fun. A lot of memories for you guys as players and people. So this will be fun. So let's get after it.
Yeah, but yeah, for sure. But before we get after it, Bruce, I have to ask you. I need to know, with everything going on in this country, how you're feeling about it. How was it? With your team, going back to your team and having those conversations if you've had them, or just your thoughts.
My team's wonderful. I actually I was in contact with a couple of players before this call and asked them if we wanted to take the day off on Friday. And I think it's important, and they felt it would be a great thing to do, and we will do that. How I feel personally is I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed with our country that it's 2020 and we still have a racist society. And I'm privileged. I don't know what it's like to be black in this country. But what I can see from the outside, it's not good. And I can't understand why. I continue to see these police shootings, and I can't see the logic in why any policeman in this day and age would even consider using a weapon in the circumstances that they've had. And it's embarrassing. And I think that we've got to have a huge culture change in our country, a huge change. I mean, it's just not a little thing in changing protocols and police departments. It's the mentality of our entire country and the leadership in our country. And if there's ever a time where people have to vote, it's now. And they've got to get the right people in office with the right philosophies to improve our society.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, Bruce, we can get into this all day. We had Jeremy Abovisi, OBBC last episode, and, we talked deeply about it. And, just from, I don't want to keep this just in the sports related of the locker room, just hearing you say that and your guys in your locker room, I know will commend you and feel, grateful to play, for you, a coach with that mindset that truly understands, because you see a lot of coaches currently out there who are dismissing it, or, predominantly black players on their teams. And it's really a shit show. And so, I think gaining the trust is ultimately going to be big for your locker room and establishing that.
Yeah, I'm grateful to coach all of our players. I think coaches are very privileged. I've said this hundreds of times over the last 20, 30, 40 years of my coaching career. I've never had a job. It's just a great experience. I have fun every day. I'm honored to be working with the people I work with every day. So this is another challenge that we have as coaches and people, and I look forward to trying to do my part and making sure things are better.
Yeah. I think that goes hand in hand with the conversations that we had last week, especially with, white people having to take a lead role in this, change. And so it's great to see, obviously, Bruce, you're a big influence in the soccer culture in America specifically. And so I think that's something that, we all look up to. All right, well, let's get into, our quick hitters, which sometimes is quick, sometimes it's not. And we'll get you warmed up and we'll get you ready for the interview. And then, as always, Ike will get the interrogation at the end, where he gets to try and get you to plead the fifth. Again, if you're able to not plead the fifth during that, start thinking of some good questions to ask us, as we will have to answer those truthfully. So let's get started. First question, it's kind of a little mixed bag here. So during your time at Virginia, and don't quote me on all these players, there might be some players that I'm missing, but 5 very, very big time players that you coached in Virginia: Claudio Reyna, Jeff Agus, Ben Olsen, John Harkes, and Tony Meola. Now, out of those 5, who during the time at Virginia did you see as having the most potential to become, a star?
That's not an easy question to answer, but you'd have to say Claudio. The game was so natural, Claudio. He made it look so easy. Harkes was a blue collar guy all the way. Tony Meola was incredibly talented as well. And we know Jeff Agus, he was just going to, outwork everybody to go along with his talent. And he was pretty focused. He knew what he wanted. But I think the most talented player was out of those 5 guys was Claudio for sure. Yeah. But I didn't know if Claudio was ever going to mature enough at the professional level to have a career, and he did.
That was my next question. Who was raging too often at UVA that you got stories about?
What was that now?
Who was partying a little too much that you heard through the grapevine? Because I know college coaches.
I have a feeling I got an idea who it might be, but
I don't think I could give you one answer. I mean, those guys enjoyed themselves. When I first got to Virginia, it was I hate to say, you guys might not have even been born then. 1978. Virginia was known as one of the big party schools in the country. And they had the Easters, which was unbelievable. People all over the country came there. And now today, Virginia, the campus is dry, which was remarkable. But it was an incredible party school. And I'll tell you, I was always worried about my guys. I brought them from New Jersey, that they would, be like a fish out of water. And those guys learned real quick how to get adjusted in that culture and enjoy themselves. And they had a great time. And certainly, I would say 4 of the guys you mentioned sure enjoyed Virginia. And I thought I was going to get a big, in New Jersey as well.
Yeah, a big Tones, Tony Meola. I heard he was a party animal during his time in Kansas City. So that would have been my guess, but fair enough. All right, here's another question between the same 5. The most difficult to work with during your time in Virginia?
It was Claudio. Claudio was a bit undisciplined. He was, he was a superior talent on the collegiate level, and he took it for granted, and he fell in love with fraternity life.
And was he part of a frat at the same time?
He wasn't he wasn't a fraternity member, but he was in the fraternity all the time, and he had a good time. And in the off season, he would put on 10, 15, 20 pounds, and it was challenging. And he wasn't spending a whole lot of time in the library either. And having said all that, he's a brilliant guy. He speaks probably 3 languages now, and he's a real brilliant guy. But it was an environment. Virginia, Charlottesville, and UVA is such a great environment that you can get carried away with it a little bit. And it was his first time away from home, and he had a blast.
And then he went to Wolfsburg, correct? Where there's literally nothing but where they build Volkswagen cars. So that might have been a culture shock.
Didn't he start at Leverkusen?
Okay, is that where he started?
Yeah, Leverkusen.
Okay. Okay, because Wolfsburg, literally, there's nothing there.
And it was challenging, and I didn't know if he was going to make it, and he did beautifully.
Yeah.
No question about that.
Yeah, he's done well for himself after soccer too. I mean, he worked at NYC. Now he's down in Austin, so doing pretty well. All right, last question between the same 5. Biggest coach's pet out of those 5?
Coach's pet? None of them.
Really?
Coaches? None of them. They were all pretty confident guys. They didn't need to come to the coach's office every day. They were good guys though. But Tony didn't last long. Tony was only in Virginia, I believe, for 2 years, and he was starting on the national team as a freshman, second year. No, a freshman.
Wow.
His original freshman year, he showed up the first day, went through registration, and we gave him a leave of absence because he was going to go play with the national team in qualifying, and then was part of that team that qualified for the '90 World Cup. And he was pretty focused on turning professional. So the following year he played, and that was it. And he was gone. John Harkes stayed for 3 years. Tony stayed for 3, and Jeff was there the whole time.
Didn't he play baseball
living
too?
On the lawn and all of that. So Jeff was a very good student as well. But they all took advantage of the opportunity.
Didn't Tony play baseball at Virginia as well?
He played baseball as well. Yeah.
Wow.
He was a better soccer player than a baseball player.
Was he? Okay.
I didn't know that.
All right, last question for the quick hitters, and we'll change focus over here a little bit. Best club team that you've ever coached, and I'm giving you 5 options, and if there's anybody else, but I'm assuming these 5 are the top 5. DC United 96, DC United 97, Galaxy 11, Galaxy 12, or Galaxy 14. And share with us a little bit of why, what made it special.
Can I give you another team?
Yeah, you can.
DC United 1998.
I knew it was coming.
I like that you said that because I want some stories about that.
That was by far our best team.
Really?
That was a terrific team.
And,
Talented everywhere. The big cat, Tony Santa, was coming into his prime then.
I work for his foundation, by the way, up here. It's great.
Yeah,
great
he's
foundation.
Great. I mean, we had an extremely talented team. And then the next team, I guess I would say was probably the Galaxy team, Beckham's last year, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, was 2012. That was a good team because
That was a good team.
Beckham, what a great professional he was. People would never think this, but he wouldn't take a day off, nor would Robbie Keane, and they were just great leaders on the team. And eventually, Landon had to follow. Because if Landon could take 3 days off a week, he would gladly do it. But those guys were such good pros and so competitive. It got Landon moving as well, and that was a pretty good team. But I tell you, my DC United team might have been better than the Galaxy team. And on DC United, we had 9 internationals playing. We had a very talented team. We had Agus in the back with Yamosa. We had Santa, we had Richie Williams, Marco Echeverry, Jaime Moreno, John Harkes, probably Raul Diaz-Arce. So we had a bunch of talented guys. Sean Medved.
That was the year that you guys won essentially Champions League back in the day, right?
Yeah, and we won I think that year we won the
South
Inter-American Cup too. We beat Sao Paulo.
No, Vasco.
We had a good team. Ben Olsen was on the '98 team. Ben was Penn was a good young player then. His ankles were kind of legitimate at that point. So we had a talented team.
That DC United team was my childhood team growing up. To this day, I heart DC United as a team that I would play for if I could, just because it was my first game I ever went to. They were always on, I forget even the network. It was just the team, and I remember how talented they were. So if I ever got the chance, maybe I'd play in DC. But now that Charlotte and Co is coming, so maybe not. But no, they were very good.
That was a good team, and the Galaxy teams are good. No question about that. But that 98 DC United team was pretty damn talented.
And what about in terms of like which team did you have to work the most at doing your own job? Because some teams, they're, like you said, they're so good that maybe you just put the players out there. But maybe there's, whatever, some internal stuff going on.
Clearly the Galaxy teams were a lot more work because of the man management, with the guys we had. They were challenging a good challenge, but when you're coaching David Beckham, that's a little different than most players, and how we dealt with everything on the road and all the different issues. There were a lot of big personalities, so that took a lot of work for sure.
Sal, I'm hoping that your coach isn't taking any more days off over there, is he?
No, but he will say, because I'm one of the older guys, he's like, hey, if you ever need a day off, you let me know. You need to relax. He's like, my career would have been a lot longer had I had more days off. So I know he believes in that motto.
I remember this one time with Beckham. So it was going to be Beckham's last year, and it was Thursday. It was Friday, and we were going to play an MLS Cup final on Sunday. And he goes to me after training on Thursday. I'm going to run a few sprints, okay? And I said to him, David, we've been training for 11 months straight. What do you need to run some sprints for? He goes, I just want to run a few. I said, just be easy. And he does his hamstring. And he was just doing like 20-yard sprints, and he still played in the final and was damn good. He was old school. Today you get a hamstring injury like that, you're out for 6 weeks.
You're done. Yeah.
He played. And he's remarkable, but it was going to be his last game, so he wasn't going to miss it.
Right. Well, actually, I wanted to ask you a question. Okay, so we're good with the quick hitters, and I hope you're warmed up now, and we'll get into a little bit of the interview. But I did want to ask you, in that third year of DC United, you guys had won the first 2 years. Bob had been your assistant coach. He goes to Chicago, and in that year that you said was the best team that you had, you guys lost to Bob in the finals. So how was that? Was that double disappointing, or was that kind of like, well, my assistant coach is now a head coach, and was like some kind of pride in it, or how was that? How was that feeling?
Well, it was certainly going to be competitive. We have egos just like players, but Bob had a good team, did a great job with him. We knew we were in a little bit of trouble because in those days, MLS really didn't figure out the playoff schedule that well. And I remember we played the final in LA, and we ended up in a 3-game series with Columbus, and we played on Wednesday of that week. Bob's team had 10 days off, and they were in California for about a week, and we had to travel out on Thursday. And we played Wednesday night in DC. Traveled out on Thursday, and it was like 90 degrees in LA. This is in whatever it would have been in November, I guess. And they had a little bit of an edge on us, no question about it. And it was a game that was kind of close, but they deserved to win the game, and that's that. I think I never complain in those type of games where our team gave it the best effort and we fell short that day. There's nothing I could do about it, but certainly there was that competitive rivalry with Bob, but he did a great job with that team. It's an expansion team, and they won the cup. And I think that was the first year, right, for Bob?
Yeah, that was the first year, 98.
Yeah, that was pretty damn good.
You coached a lot of players that then became coaches. Is there anyone that stands out that you thought, okay, when this guy's done playing, this guy's going to be a hell of a coach? I mean, you coached Jesse, right, at DC for a little bit.
Well, yeah, Jesse was going to be. Jesse was Jesse was coaching at 20 years old with us at DC United. He was he was a little Bob in some ways, very
Yeah.
very wasn't afraid to open his mouth up and say something. And if you followed his career, he was really outgoing and aggressive, but a student of the game, a really bright guy, and there's no question in my mind that I thought he could be a coach. I would say probably the same thing with Richie Williams, who's now working with me as an assistant. Obviously, there was no question that Bob was going to be good. Bob was has an unbelievable passion for the game and his own way of looking at things, both on and off the field. And he's pretty confident in the way he thinks and the way he wants to do things. And he's simply an outstanding coach. John Harkes is in coaching now. And I don't think I ever would have thought that John Harkes would make it in coaching. So he's had some peaks and valleys, but he looks like he's finding himself now and doing a pretty good job with his USL team. Ben Olsen, I didn't think Ben would be a coach. I thought Ben would be like a U.S. senator or something, and not a coach.
Ben's the second longest tenured coach, right? In the league after Peter.
It's unbelievable.
What about Chris Armas?
Armas is, I'm not surprised at all that Armas is a coach. I actually tried to hire Chris out in L.A. at some point, and he's a New York guy anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, you look at it, and he wasn't ready to make the move with his family and all, but he's a guy that deserves a lot of respect, the way he conducts himself and deals with people, and hopefully he has another 30 years of coaching in him, because I think he's an outstanding person.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
So Bruce, true or false, if I had come out in the 2009 MLS Super Draft when it was relevant, you guys would have taken me over Omar Gonzalez?
That's true, and you know that because I told you that.
I heard it through the grapevine before you confirmed it, though. So, Omar, if you're listening, you're welcome for your career trajectory.
I watched you play at Wake Forest. I thought you were going to be a very good professional. So I had that wrong. So what can you say?
You did have it wrong. He stunk at San Jose. I was so disappointed when he came to Kansas City.
Okay, Benny, but let's think about this. Go to San Jose that time period or go to Galaxy that time period?
Yeah.
Big difference in your career trajectory.
You would have blossomed.
I think there was a bit of a difference. Those were great rivalries, though. LA
it was.
And San Jose.
Oh, my gosh. I can't.
Great rivalries.
Yeah, for sure. And now the new Cali teams have kind of taken away from what
that game we used to play in Stanford was unbelievable.
The Cali Classico.
Yeah.
We lose every year in like the 93rd minute.
Right, but every year in the playoffs you would end up beating us. So it didn't. You won the games that really mattered, but
that was a fun rivalry.
Going back to after, so you're there at DC, and then you get the national team job after the '98 World Cup, and I'm really curious to know. I mean, you could tell me any story from those 4 years building up to 2002, but you guys had a ridiculous run in 2002. Probably deserved better in the quarters. Beat Portugal in that ridiculous game where you guys, go off to a 3-0 lead early on in the first half. Did you guys expect that? Like, what was the mindset going into that World Cup? Because you guys had a pretty tough 3 games in the group with Portugal, South Korea, who's the host, Poland. So, what was the mindset? Did you guys know that you had something special?
Well, we had a tough time in qualifying too.
Yep.
We had a battle to qualify for the World Cup. We had a 3-game losing streak at one point. But the team we had, you know how national teams go, you can get caught at times where a lot of key players aren't available. And there's always this odd mixture with your domestic players and your players from overseas and the fitness levels and all that stuff. And, we survived all of that in a really challenging campaign. In those days, we were probably the third or fourth or fifth best team in CONCACAF. It was always Mexico and Costa Rica. They were the dominant teams then. and we had a real challenge, but we got through all of it. And I think one of the things that was really positive in that 4-year period, building up to the World Cup, or 3-year period, was the fact that the players remembered '98, the World Cup in France, where, forget about not doing well on the field, but they were an embarrassment and they conducted themselves poorly. And that was always something we talked about, how we were going to conduct ourselves through qualifying, everything, and what it meant to play for your country and all of that. And when we got to the World Cup, we had a unique group of individuals. We had an incredible blend of experience. When you look at an Ernie Stewart, our goalkeepers in Friedel and Keller, Claudio, who was basically in his prime then. And then when Eddie Lewis, we had these young bucks in Donovan and Beasley, Eddie Lewis, John O'Brien, who people will never realize this. He's probably one of the top 5 players in the history of U.S. soccer. Really an incredibly talented guy. Pablo fit in beautifully. Tony Santa was our best player in the World Cup with Brad Friedel. He was unbelievable. So we had a talented team, but we had also guys where Ernie wore the captain's armband in the opening game because Claudio was injured, and after that was just one of the great reserves, and did a great job with the team in terms of our mentality. Everybody on that team wanted our team to succeed. And not to be critical of other groups, but the team I had in 2017 that I inherited, as a coaching staff, we talked and we said, if we can get through this year and qualify for the World Cup, we have to make a dozen changes to this team, because we just didn't have the right characters, and a lot of guys weren't in it for the right reasons. And I think those things are important, especially for a U.S. team that, you could argue is not as talented as most of the teams you're going to see in World Cup. So we had the right balance of talent and the right kind of mentality and team spirit, and they were terrific, and Brian McBride, there's not a better guy to coach. All about the team. So we had all of these great personalities and talents, and you get a little bit lucky too. We spanked Portugal. That game shouldn't have been 3-2. The next game of Korea was if I'm allowed to say bitch on your on your show
you can
here.
Say whatever you want.
It was a bitch. We were playing them in the hottest venue in Korea, the home team, 65,000 people, and we get out of there with a point. And Clinton Mathis scored one of the greatest goals in the history of U.S. soccer.
I remember watching that
as
as
professional a goal as you're ever going to see. We get that point, and then we did a good job in scouting, and we knew Poland inside out. But Poland lost their first 2 games, and they were out. The coach was pissed off, and he brought 11 new guys in to play us. And we get the lineup in the locker room. We don't know who the hell anyone is. I'm calling Janis Mihalik back in Connecticut, a Polish American who did the scouting for Poland. He didn't know anybody, and we go out there and we got our asses kicked. But that was a Friday, and I think we played Mexico on Monday, and we had Frankie Haydick was suspended, so I had to change, and we went to a back 3. And it's typical with those guys. They didn't blink an eye. They responded well, and we really got after Mexico and won. And so it was a great team. The team we had when I coached in 2006 didn't have that kind of character, and we had an easy time qualifying. We just breezed through qualifying in CONCACAF. So there's a lot of intangibles that people never talk about. Team chemistry, being really, really being committed to the program. Those things are important with national teams. You see, in World Cups where teams are, fighting each other as opposed to their opponents, and it gets difficult. Benny, you know that, and I think, in South Africa, you guys did a great job, and it looked like you had a team that was really committed as well.
Yeah,
and those things are important.
I was going to kind of vouch for that, because in 2010 it was very similar. Like what you're describing about the 2002 team definitely applies to a lot of aspects of the 2010 team.
And we thought, as a coaching, we went into the World Cup. We were ranked number 4 in the world, and our opening game was the Czech Republic, and we knew from scouting them we were in trouble. Man for man, they were better than us. They were better than us on every position on the field, and we had to get a little bit lucky. And we made a mistake in the opening 10, 15 minutes off a corner kick that cost us, and they got a goal, and we were in trouble. And then the next game against Italy, we fought like bastards to get a point, and we're in position against
Ghana.
Who was Ghana?
Ghana.
Right? And Ghana, boy, were they talented in the midfield, and we could have won that game. Fell short. We got a bad call in that game.
Wait, so Bruce, I'm not gonna really pose this as a question, but everything you just mentioned about previous national teams, I'm just going to let it sit in the air. I'm curious how this whole thing is going to come together with Berhalter and under the reins. I'm not saying anyone's going to answer it, but just food for thought for a lot of us.
Well, I
listen.
think Greg's a young coach, and he's really into the sports science and the conditioning and the all the metrics that are important in analytics and all of those things. That sometimes you gotta step away and look at guys and say, who can play, and they're looking at 50 different things that sports scientists will tell them to look at, and looking at all the data and this and that, and sometimes you got to look at the characteristics of the players and see what's going to make a team and what kind of leaders you have. And right now in the program, and it's been tough times, let's face it, there's been all the issues with the U.S. soccer, and then you throw in now this time in the United States, which is crazy, and the national team hasn't been together. And then they're going to get thrown into a real hectic qualifying campaign to try to get to a World Cup. And is it enough time to have guys step up and be leaders on the team? A lot of the young guys talk. They do a lot of talking. Can they do some playing with that as well? So he's got a real challenge of putting the team together. I showed my coaches the other day an interview with Greg Popovich. And he was talking to a group of coaches in Germany when this would have been about, say, 7 years ago, where San Antonio had just won the NBA championship. And he talked about coaching. And he said, anyone can, draw up a play, out of bounds play, or you do this, or you do that. Else you shouldn't be coaching. That's assumed. That's what coaches do. So you should be able to do that. But the real challenge is how you deal with all of these personalities and you merge them together and make them into a team. And you learn from trial and error, and it takes a lot of years. The only guy I've seen really get that done fairly early in a coaching career is Zidane. He's been brilliant what he's done at Real Madrid, but that's challenging, and it's amazing to see a former player of the stature of Zidane that can deal with players that couldn't hold his jockstrap, even though there's no such thing as a jockstrap anymore. So it's always interesting, but Popovich is talking about the challenge of building a team and how you earn the trust of your players and they become leaders. In our sport, it's really interdependent, and once the whistle blows, the players have got to take over the game. So they have to have a good understanding of what they're trying to do. You got to have good leadership on the field. There's no timeouts, as we know, and all of that stuff. So that's the challenge in our sport. And he even talked about it in the NBA, how challenging it is in dealing with the personalities. But I think that's one area where it's going to take Greg a little time, and he's got a lot of young players now, which makes it even more difficult. So it's going to be challenging. But having said that, I do think they have a good group of talent. But Benny, I know that when you go into Honduras, that talent doesn't mean shit. It's about rolling up your sleeves and battling, because you don't have control of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
The officiating's terrible. The fields are terrible. It's all of that shit that they haven't been through before. And this is a young group, so they're not, they haven't gone through these grueling campaigns and dealing with all the stuff that you deal with in CONCACAF. So it'll be interesting to see. A player like Christian Pulisic is as talented as any player that's ever wore, the shirt of the United States. So it'll be interesting to see if he can step up and be a leader with that young group of players.
Yeah, I won't be able to help him because I unofficially announced my retirement, like from the national team.
Well, I think Benny can still play.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask, and that, like, we've talked about this before on the podcast, where we feel like at the national team there's a difference from coaching there and at a club team, because first, you don't get to assemble the players that you actually want. You can't go out and pick a player off a transfer and set your team the way you envision it. You kind of got to fit it with the players that you have available to you. And so, and on top of that, you don't have as much time, to like you said, so yourself, especially now with COVID and so many games being pushed back and there's no time to get together. You have even less time with these players. And so, as a coach that's been on the club level and the national team level, what are some of those things that you feel like have, real differences in how you have to coach?
It's a good question. And, it really gets awkward at the national team level if you lose some certain players. What typically happens is that over the weekend before they report, they'll travel in on a Sunday or a Monday, depending on where they're coming from, and you have a game Thursday or Friday. And does a player get out of the game without an injury? And often on Saturday night, you get a call saying a guy can't make it. We opened up the campaign when I came back in 2017 at home. We ended up playing Honduras in San Jose, and by the time our squad reported, we actually didn't have a right back. I won't drop names, but I asked the player who played right back before, I need you to play in this game there. And imagine playing for the national team says, I really don't want to play there. and those are some of the things you run into. Not only you get caught short with some players, but you have guys with different kind of attitudes. And you don't have the time to work with them. You don't have the time to work through those problems and deal with it every day. And it happens all the time. But you can lose. You could change formations because of the fact that you lose certain players. Some players can't respond well to the travel. A lot of the European-based players have a difficult time playing on the road in CONCACAF. Any games on the West Coast make it even more challenging. And you're constantly adjusting. So, when you have enough experience doing it, we usually set a roster and then we'd have 7 alternate players in case someone got hurt. But we're always tinkling with lineups, figuring how we're going to play. And then, you might find out the last minute it's not going to work. And then you make a quick change. So, you don't have the luxury you have at the club level where you're working with guys every day. You know their personalities. The other problems you have, not even with domestic players, is that the coaches don't let them leave in a good frame of mind. So we had a player in my first 2 games again. We played home against Honduras in 2017, and we were going to Panama. And we had to let a player go back because his club team told him he has to come back. And the player's crying to me that he needed to go back. And he said he had an injury and it didn't work out. So you got all these crazy little issues. And if you're not in a full cycle with the team, you don't work your way through it. And one of the problems Greg has now is he hasn't had any time with his team. So those problems you deal with every day with a national, a club team, you have them with the national team, but you really don't have the ability to really correct a lot of the issues with national teams. So it's challenging. It's a completely different animal in coaching a club team.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you one question about our tough time together in 2017. So everybody knows what happened, and obviously we didn't qualify. You inherited the team, and I've said my piece about Jurgen before with the things that I don't think he did very well. But as far as your time with the national team, and specifically that last game that we were both there for, what would be one thing that you, looking back on now in hindsight, you would change about what you had power in changing?
Well, having said that, all of us have all the answers the next day. So we had and actually I brought Bob Bradley in that trip. He didn't go to Trinidad with us, but Bob was around for Panama on some of the meetings we had. So we had the game against Panama on a Friday night in Orlando, and we were going to play Trinidad on Tuesday. So we came off of a game where we won. What did we win? 4-0 against Panama, something like that.
Yeah, Christian had a hell of a game.
Played pretty well. So the question now is, do you make any changes for the next game? And as I do almost all the time, I get the whole staff and people around and ask them, should we make any changes? Why? Is everyone healthy? All the doctors, trainers, they signed off on all the players. We had the regen session on Saturday with the guys that played. You guys did a light session over at the Orlando training facility on Saturday. Then we did one Sunday there and left for Trinidad. And then we had that mess of training on the Monday.
Yeah.
And then our not so smart communication staff put out this.
Right.
You even know the story? They put out that video.
Well, I remember there was like, I mean, the field was awful, right? We don't have to it's not an excuse. It's just a
Trinidad
fact.
Team. It was out of qualifying now.
Right.
And now they're all pissed off.
Yeah.
For the game.
And there was like it was like a moat around the field and then people were, being piggybacked onto the field.
So I had a real question about whether to play Tim. Tim had come back from an injury and he played the last, say, 6 or 7 games of Colorado and then played the Panama game. It was okay. And I had this gut feeling maybe we play Guzan. And I asked the staff and we had a vote and an interesting conversation. And without divulging any names, it was decided that we would stick with Tim in the goal. That was one of the changes I thought of making. And then I thought of a couple others, but we had this issue with Pulisic. And on the day of the game, we gave him a fitness test and he passed. And he's just a tough kid. But Josie also was another issue. And at the end, we decided to stay with the team that played against Panama. They all wanted to play. And you always hesitant. You never know. But having said that, the first goal that Trinidad got and the second goal was highly unusual. We started the game very well. And I don't know if you remember, Josie had that good chance.
Yep.
And then they get the goal off of, their own goal off of Omar's header, which is one of the oddest plays I've ever seen. And then I'm standing on the sideline as that right back took that shot to beat Tim Howard. So we're down 2-0 going in at half. And we just said we need to get a goal early, and we got it. And once it was 2-1, I thought we were going to get the point.
I agree.
And having said that, we didn't. Well, the other results went the wrong way. And then you ask at the end, would you have done anything differently? Well, after watching the game for 90 minutes, yeah, you'd make some changes, but you don't get those opportunities. And I would say this, that I thought in the season, I don't know if you remember, we played 18 games with that team, and we lost only 2 games in the year, and had some really good games on a team that I didn't think was a particularly good team. And one thing we lost, I don't regret the team we played in Trinidad. I regret the team we played against Costa Rica in New York.
Yeah.
Because we had the games where we were going to play Costa Rica in New York and then go down and play Honduras. The team I chose to play in New York was most of the European players, and I did this for a couple of reasons. I figured we're playing at home. We have a little bit more juice at home. The the conditions aren't as demanding as they would be down in Honduras, because a lot of the European players have a tough time playing that heat and humidity, and we got beat, and we could have done better in that game, maybe even gotten a point, but a couple of mistakes were made. One is we chose to play Costa Rica in New York, which was stupid, and we didn't play well. And I thought the European players on the day was a mistake playing them. They weren't fit. It was September. It was the first week in September. They went through their preseasons. We tracked them with their club teams, and we thought they were going to be fit enough to play, and they weren't. So that's a mistake. And then we went to Honduras and we changed our team and we got a result there. But that's the game that I think I probably should have stuck with the guys that won the Gold Cup. If you remember that whole thing.
Yeah.
We had a good run in the Gold Cup with just domestic players, because the European clubs didn't want to release anyone in the summer. If I had to do it all over again, I would have played the team that played in the Gold Cup against Costa Rica. So that's the one mistake. I don't regret the team we ended up playing against Trinidad. So on the year, we had a decent year. We got ourselves back in position to qualify, and it was all up to us, and we failed. We're big boys. That's it. You didn't get it done. Go home and blame whoever you want to blame.
That's right.
And that's the way I feel. And I thought on the year in 2017 that pool of players gave us a great effort. I have no regrets. They were pretty good. There were a lot of odd things inheriting a team from Jurgen and the way they went about doing their business. That was a little bit challenging, but I knew that. That's what I signed up for.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember being in that camp, and I admit that was the first camp that I'd been called up to, but it was a very strange feeling knowing after the game that you hadn't qualified. And I mean, I felt bad, but I felt bad for some of the guys. I know Zusi was on that team, Beezer was on that team, guys that I played with a lot. And I mean, I could see, how much pain was in their eyes and their, minds and bodies. So it was just, it's
and
kind of,
even at the end of that game, we had some chances.
That's the one thing I regret. I still regret not yelling to Bobby Wood to get out of the way so I could try and head that ball home. But instead, I got Bobby Wood's dome in my forehead.
Bruce, was there ever a point in your career where you could have gone and coached overseas, or did you ever have that ambition to coach overseas?
Yeah, I had an offer to coach Brøndby after the 2006 World Cup.
It's a big club in Denmark. I love Brøndby. Is a lot of fun to play against in their stadium.
And I thought the sporting director, the whole staff at Brøndby, they came to see me a couple of times, and I was just so exhausted after 2006. I didn't feel like I could just get up and go right away to Europe and start coaching. But having said that, that's probably something I should have done, and I didn't do it.
Yeah.
But
after how you said your Red Bull adventure went, then maybe that would have been the right one to do.
Yeah, I ended up with the Red Bull instead, which was a real big mistake on my part, to be honest with you. Yeah. So, you make mistakes in life.
Yep.
Another thing that I've heard is I may or may not have been, you were looking at calling me up to that Gold Cup, but I wasn't possibly released. And I don't know anything about this. It's never been confirmed to me, actually.
Is this PV?
I don't know what happened in the chain of command and the communication. I don't know. All I know is that I was possibly in a discussion, and something got lost in translation.
Yes, you were.
I just know. Okay, so it is true. This is actually the first time I've had a conversation about it, which is sad. But anyways, Bruce, how do you feel about the Orlando tournament that's occurring here shortly? And
Are we going to go
thing
through
about
the winners of the groups too?
I think. Well, first
we
of all,
could.
I think most of the players want to play in this tournament. Not, I mean, if they had to choose going to Orlando and doing, they wouldn't do that, but they want to play. Players want to play again. They want to get back in the competition. I do think it's going to be highly unusual. It's going to be challenging. I think the mental aspect of it is going to be even more important than just going out and playing a game. It's, whether we like it or not, and however nice the hotel is and all of that, we're going to be locked up for 30, 40 days. And I think that's going to be challenging. And then the conditions, you guys have been in Orlando in July. It's brutal. And, the teams aren't going to be real fit. And it's going to be a real challenge. And I think, mentally, it's going to be important that you can, keep your team together. I think, you have to have a roster that's a little bit deep. You're not going to be playing, same starting team, throughout that tournament in Orlando. It's going to beat up some guys. So you got to have a team with good depth, the right kind of spirit, and you got to get a little bit lucky. We're going to go there without really having played a game since March.
Yeah.
Right.
Who the hell knows what you're going to look like when you get on the field?
Exactly. On top of being quarantined with COVID, on top of
and
leaving your
it's probably
families,
going to be
and
95 degrees.
Right.
And humid.
And
Exactly.
90% humidity.
Yeah.
On top of a civil rights movement and trying to get your mind into it. For me, I'm already struggling right now, just after everything that's gone on, and so obviously,
And you're right in the thick of it, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's challenging on a lot of aspects that I haven't really shared on this podcast, but to that,
and you never think about it, but you go on a road trip and you're gone for 3 days, 5 days, but now a lot of guys have young families, and that's going to be challenging. And you know how it is when you go away on these trips, and how difficult it is to deal with the families. And now this is going to be extended. It's going to be challenging.
It's like 2 long preseasons back to back. Yeah.
Yep.
That's long.
But I think people want to play. That's the impression I get.
I think I have you guys coming out of your group, though.
We have a good team.
Yeah, I don't know.
You guys get to play Montreal again.
Yeah, we started the season, with a lot of players out, and Carlos Gil's back, and Carlos is one of the better players in the league. He's a good player, so it'll be nice to have him back on the field. And we have our left backs going to come. He didn't play either. Butner. He didn't play in our first 2 games either. Delamea didn't play. So, those guys are healthy now. So that'll make our team better. And, who knows? But I think we have a decent group. Having said all that, it's going to be highly unusual because you got the 3 games that count on you in the standings in Orlando, and then you go back home. Nobody knows what's happening after that. So those 3 games, they may be
right.
the majority of the season. So
Right.
they're going to be critically important. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully this pandemic settles down a little bit, and there's not a second wave in the fall, and we're going to be able to, finish the season and play maybe 20 to 25 league games and then have the playoffs.
Yeah. I'm picking the dark horse. I'm going with the Crew. I don't know why. There's a part of me that's going
Columbus
with the Crew.
is winning the tournament. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Just going to perform. It's going to perform. Whether they win or not, I don't know. But they're going to perform. I just feel it in my gut.
Well,
anything can happen in this kind of thing, right? No one knows.
Yeah, they look pretty good in their first couple of games. They did a good job bringing in some players there.
Yeah.
I think Group D is the group of death, though.
I'll be honest with you.
Group D, we got.
If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you the group.
Yeah, because he's laughing because he knows. I don't care either, but I know.
Group D has got Sporting Kansas City, my ex team, Colorado Rapids, my kind of ex team for 3 months, Minnesota United, Ike's team that Sporting plays every single Open Cup, and then Real Salt Lake, the all-time rivalry for Sporting KC.
Sporting, that game's going to be a bloodbath, and I can't wait to watch it because then you're going to see the interactions in the hotel. I'm just going to be sitting there on the sideline like I have nothing to do with this anymore. I don't know,
There's
man.
gonna be there's gonna be some
be
fun
awkward.
aspects to it for sure. This whole
It's-
thing.
Well,
it's
I thought the group with the Galaxy and LAFC and it's interesting.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
New York and Atlanta, that one too. I mean,
Yeah.
there'll
Is
be
that
some
the
big
Red
ones.
Bulls or New York?
yeah, Red
New
Bulls
York
and
Red Bulls.
Atlanta. There's a little rivalry there.
Okay.
And then you throw in a little 6-team group as well to round off the tournament. But
Well,
Oh,
I'll tell you
goodness.
my experience with this is the league has gotten much better.
Yeah,
It really has.
For sure.
It's getting better.
yeah, the qualities. I mean, the number of DPs and then TAM and GAM players and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of quality in the league. So
Yeah, it's
it's
getting
good
there.
to see.
You have a good team. Minnesota's a good team.
Yeah. Oh. Thank you. At first, I thought you were referring to Benny, and I was like, "Well, he's not on a team." / he was trialing for your team. He still won't. He still won't admit that, by the way. So
I couldn't believe it that I was training with New England. He thought it was a joke at first.
I just didn't see it coming. He didn't do anything for like 3 months.
Well, I
and then
mean,
Bruce
my
called
2
you.
years
Bruce,
in New
if you had
England.
if you had listened to any of our podcasts, we don't speak too highly of New England until you got to the team.
And that's true. And by we, it was mostly Benny.
Yeah,
Wait. Let me just put this out there. What I refer to as my 2 seasons there. That's what I refer to. And
Well,
of course,
I think the our franchise has a long way to go. There needs to be a big culture change. The ownership has been real good with me, but we have a way to go. You know, your whole organization dictates your team. I think it's not only the team you put on the field; it's your whole organization, and we've got to get it better. You know, all of us got to be better. But I think the Crafts are committed to make this thing go. The next step we have is building a stadium in Boston.
There it
And
is.
they're working hard at it. So
Should we
hopefully that
segue
happens.
into the interrogation? Because that's the
Yeah,
first question that
let's
I
do
have.
yeah, I was just gonna say, from my year and a half playing there, and from the outside looking in from the rest of the league, that one change, if New England Revolution had a stadium with grass field close to Boston, that would make it a destination that people would want to go to. Whereas right now, playing in Gillette in a 70,000 person stadium with 15, 20,000 max on turf is just not as appealing.
I would agree with that.
And
Well,
with that, Bruce, you have segued perfectly into Ike's interrogation. Your seat will start to warm up a little bit. So buckle up, Ike. He's
Let's
all
go.
yours.
All right. I ask you 5 questions. You get to plead the 5th at once. If you answer all 5, you can ask any question to us that we must answer.
Okay.
All right. With question number 1, we all see the article every 6 to 8 months saying that the Revolution are getting a stadium to give people false hope. So, which is more likely going to happen? A downtown stadium in Boston or the Orlando tournament going well without a major hiccup?
I would say the downtown stadium in Boston has a better chance.
Yes. I love that answer. God, I hope that's true.
So you think so we don't even need to go to Orlando. The prophet has told us what's going
No,
to
I
happen.
think you got to go to Orlando, but I think there's going to
It
be
just
a
won't
few
end well.
hiccups along the way.
Yeah. Great. Love that.
Hey, well, with Bill Hamid, his latest post on Twitter, it's not going to go well.
What
I
did
don't
he
know
say?
who
It's a
I
long.
mean,
It's too long.
he compared to staying at Disney in the hotel as being in jail, and I don't know,
Well, to
some
be
other
fair,
things.
To be fair, the initial proposal that they had sent to us was jail-like. It was like, don't leave your room for a week. You can't see any of your teammates. We'll bring you meals to your room. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, what if you get hungry in
slide
between
them under
windows?
your doors.
It was
Well,
wild.
I've never been
But-
in jail, but I still think that Disney
Yeah.
will be better than being in jail.
Yeah, I would imagine so too. But all right, that was question number 1. All right, question number 2. You've kind of alluded to 2017 national team, the chemistry on that. So with that, who was the biggest headache to manage, Jeff Cameron or Jeff Cameron?
I think the answer would be Jeff Cameron.
And why?
I don't think Jeff liked me. Period. You know, I never had any indication that he might have. And he, he's a guy that just, thinks a little differently than most people. But he's a talented guy. I wish him the best. I know he said a few things, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to have an opinion, and I wish him the best.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to go this route, but you said guys who didn't like you, and it just reminded me that we had Rob Stone on, and he told us on this episode that you and him would butt heads from time to time, and he said if he could have, we asked him because he's a huge wrestling fan, if he could have given you any finishing wrestling move, he would have given you the DDT or like the choke slam or something.
I don't know anything about wrestling.
This is Rob Stone, the little 98 pounder. He's my neighbor in Manhattan Beach.
Your neighbor, yeah.
No, he says you guys are great now, but there was a while that you two just butted heads.
He was, I would tell you most of my career I didn't like doing interviews with people, and I would agree. I probably wasn't real cooperative with Rob in the early years, but I think Rob's a great guy. And I'll tell you, anyone that can do bowling, my hat's off to them. He gets the bowling tour with ESPN and does a heck of a job. But Rob's a good guy. I think I'd kick his ass in a wrestling match.
Love that. I don't even know if that was a question. I just had to make note of that. We'll see if we come back. So next question. This league is, as I like to ask the players, the worst road trip and, worst place to play. For you, what's the worst road trip to manage a game in and why?
The worst one to manage. Well,
or just like you send your team. Yeah.
It's night and day from the travel from 25 years ago to today.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a lot better. But,
like you're sending your team out there to pretty much lose. What kind? Like what's that stadium that you're like, damn it, this is gonna be tough.
I think the two teams in altitude are tough: Salt Lake and Colorado.
Montreal, we played in that dome, the opening game of the season, which was one of the worst experiences I've ever had with the team. It was terrible, but for the most part, that and also. Every time I have a team that plays in Dallas, it seems to be like 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And that's tough. But I think the games in altitude are the most difficult on the road.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Usually Dallas, altitude is easy. But the correct answer, actually, when I think about it, would have been Cary, North Carolina, when you kept sending your Galaxy teams to lose in the Open Cup to my NCFC boys.
Well, that was unbelievable too. It's in U.S. soccer. They've regionalized it now, and I strongly suggested that we end up with this trip that we have to play midweek in Cary. We lose the bid to host to the whatever they're called. What are they called?
Real Hawks at the time, and then now they're NCFC. Yeah.
And we played on the practice field. We didn't play in the stadium. We played in the practice field, and it was 110 degrees out, and we lost in overtime. We had to charter a plane there, and then we were going to Columbus 3 days later. So it cost us like $250,000 to go to Cary and lose the game.
Yeah, that was one of the 3 years in a row that you guys lost, though.
It's ridiculous. And we lost to I think Puerto Rico, maybe.
Yeah.
City Islanders.
Yeah.
Might have lost to the Islanders one year. We didn't do real well on a lot of those.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next question. It's
what are we on? Are we on 4 or 5?
It's 4 or 5. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Which one of these coaches now that have been under your tutelage at some point have been the most successful in their careers from first to worst between Jesse Marsch, Ben Olsen, and Bob Bradley?
What do you mean first to worst?
The most decorated career in your opinion, or the most success that you value that they've had, whatever criteria it is that you want.
Well, I think as a coach, I tell this to Bob all the time. You couldn't pay me enough money to have to coach where he's coached, and the Egypt gig Only Bob could have taken on that challenge. And then going to France, and he was in Norway as well?
Yep.
And where else was he?
England.
Yes, one.
England, right. Which is unbelievable. He didn't get a fair break there. I think that journey is absolutely remarkable. So my hat is off to Bob. I don't see many people doing that. And then of all people, I was actually shocked at the steps that Jesse has made in his career, and pretty remarkable. Give him a lot of credit for that. And then Ben has to go third on the list, even though I love Ben. But I say Bob won. Jesse's a competitive guy. He's going to try to outdo Bob at some point in his career.
Yeah, he is.
And Ben is going to be the head coach at DC United for another 20 years. So, and then he'll run for governor in Virginia.
All right. So that was question 4. I'm going to leave you with the doozy. Question 5. Let's see if
you can plead the 5th, by the way, so you don't have to ask us a question, Bruce, just so you know.
Okay.
You don't have to answer this one. Which head coach can you not stand in MLS? We all have guys as players who we can't stand. Maybe there's one as a coach. Is he going to do it?
I'm too old and experienced now to hate any coach. I've been through too much in life that at this point you're so small that you actually hate a guy.
I guess the question is, who do you want to get a one up on when you win? Like you're like deep down, like yes,
Bob Bradley. I don't know if we're good enough to beat LAFC. But hopefully we get a chance to play against Bob this year. But they have a good team. That'd be an enjoyable game to play. And you'll see, we're going to have a good team.
Yeah.
So I answered all 5 questions, and
boy.
This is the question I have for all of you guys.
Okay.
What are the proudest moments in your careers?
Proudest moment in my career was making the World Cup team in 2010.
I knew that answer.
Proudest. It's not obviously the most emotional but in terms of, I felt like I'd done something special with my career and my life and that kind of thing. That was the proudest moment.
Proud. I mean, I'm proud, I would say. And because I played such a part in it, it would just be when we won Supporter Shield in 2015 with Red Bull, my first year there. I was starting right back in the whole second half of the season and transitioning to a new position. And that point in my career, I would say I was most proud about that. And then shortly after that, another proud moment for me because of where I'm from, signing with San Diego and helping kind of grow this USL team is pretty proud for me. To kind of round off my career.
Nice.
Yeah. I've got 2. One that will shortly hit the airwaves soon, I think. So I'll keep that one close to the chest. But the other one is, I would say, just being able to persevere through the injuries that I had early on. I think that was, the proudest moment that I've been, just because everyone's been able to, who accompanied me on that journey. It's been cool sharing them with them and just seeing, what's happened since. And, so many people played a hand in it. So having them come with me or live vicariously through me has been really cool to see. So I would say that. And then the other thing that will hopefully be announced soon. So,
now I sense that you want to be part of social change.
You sense something correct, Bruce.
No, and that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's fabulous. For myself, I've been asked this a lot of times. What are your proudest moments? I would say with the team, it was the 2002 World Cup team, although I could name a dozen teams that I'm equally as proud of. But I think, oddly enough, when you're in the professional ranks, you don't get to have the relationships you have with kids at a university. Often in the professional ranks, it's how much you're going to pay me and how much am I going to play. And probably the cap off my career, I think my experiences with the kids I had at the collegiate level have been the most meaningful part of my career. And it's great to see how how all of them have grown up to be who they are today. So I'm pretty proud of that. I've been pretty lucky in that regard. Take away all the other stuff. Everyone talks about how important it is to win and all that, but if you can make a difference in someone's life, I think that's really rewarding.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, Bruce, we really appreciate it. You're off the hot seat. You did well. You answered all the questions.
This wasn't as crazy as
no. We didn't have 57 people, and so we appreciate you coming on the show. And amid all, a lot of crazy stuff going on in our world and our country, socially with COVID as well, and be able to talk a little bit soccer with us. So we appreciate it, and thanks for coming on, man.
I think you guys are doing a great job with the podcast, and it's great to see you give people a different insight into the sport that they don't normally see.
Yeah.
Thank
Guys.
you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Appreciate that.
All right,
thanks for being
Bruce.
on.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bruce, for joining the podcast. A lot of interesting stories that, we hadn't heard before or known about, funny things that, he would change about certain decisions that he made. I thought, even to open up the podcast, I thought he had a really good perspective and similar to, I think, things that me and you, Sal, feel as white people in America, embarrassed. And so he shared those thoughts that I thought was, big on him. It's not, it is what it is. It's the truth, but sometimes it's hard to, open up that way. So as being such a big voice in American soccer, I'm glad that he did.
Yeah, it was important that he spoke up about it, and it was very well said. And like you said, it echoes kind of, our feelings towards it. Yeah, and just him as a U.S. soccer legend that he is. There was a lot of good stuff in there and good questions we asked him, and I thought it was interesting how he explained one of the best things or one of the best qualities a coach can have is to be able to manage personalities, and I think it goes without saying that he's probably the best at that as a U.S. soccer coach, and that's what I think a lot of players rate him as, is probably the best player manager. So that I thought was really interesting to hear from his perspective. And so it was cool.
Yeah. I think all the players in MLS who are in the know that Bruce is the guy, the best, decorated, probably coach in this league that's ever had and seen. So, today, people who didn't know he was a straight shooter saw it and listened to it. I was able to get a different even perspective of Bruce, even knowing all those things, and him touching a little bit on, the racial inequities that are occurring, and was just be able to see, even though we didn't dive deeply in, it was still, nice to see a guy in the sport who has that perspective, which sadly probably isn't everyone. But I think in general, guys, as we shift a bit, keep reaching out to us if you enjoy these talks on our websites, Patreon listeners, DM us if you really want further education. Because it's something that we won't stop talking about moving forward. So hope you enjoy the podcast as a whole. We look forward to the next episode.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate it.